Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I have several announcements. The town of Merrimack will be holding a commemorative candlelight ceremony to recognize the 15th anniversary of 9/11. The ceremony will be held at Abbey Griffith Park on Sunday, September 11th at 7 p.m. The entire community is invited. This ceremony will also be taped by Merrimack TV staff for repeat broadcast on the community channel. Merrimack Rocks, an event to celebrate Merrimack and its citizens, will be held on Saturday, September 24th from 4 to 8 p.m. at Watson Park. Come and join the fun with live music and fireworks. And they are still looking for sponsors, just to let you know. A little advertisement there. The polling voter mailer. I feel like, yeah. Should have been received. I'm not sure if you can see it in the community here, but it's bright yellow. Had the seal on it. We tried to make it really pretty obvious and separate it from all the mailings we're getting lately. And it is a notification to look into where you are registered to vote. Please do not assume that where you previously voted is where you're going to vote again. I used to be at St. John Newman. Now I'm at JMU's. Okay, it's very easy. The website, you can go into the town hall, the town website. There's a link that brings you right to the state. It's very easy. It'll tell you where you're assigned to go. Okay? Meetings online. I literally just got an email, so I'm going to read it to you. Bear with me just for a moment. You can now watch Merrimack TV online as you would on your television. Simply visit merrimacktv.com and click on Watch Live on your laptop, desktop, or mobile device. Some browsers may require you to click play more than once. If you are having issues, make sure that your device's OS, whatever that means, okay, and browsers plugging, see, I'm not the only one, are up to date. If a meeting is cable cast live, like this is now, it's being played live on cable, you can watch it online as it is televised. If it's on one of our channels, it streams simultaneously online. This has been beta tested throughout the summer with minimal issues and has now been made public for all to view. So hopefully for those who cannot get it on the cable, you can now have it live. Yeah, a whole group is just going to jump right in there and watch us on your desktops or on your phone. Go to help you. Okay. I often say you have trouble sleeping if you have one with it. Okay, I do want to be able to read this letter. Many people were familiar with the debris, the steel debris that was in the river down by Watson. And we had, fortunately, it's all gone now. We don't know what it was. We think it had to do with chicken pens or something. Anyway, it's gone. But there was a thank you note that was sent, and I want to read it for the public. This is a Thomas Cook, and it was written by Kyle Fox, the Director of Public Works. I want to extend my deep appreciation and sincere gratitude to you for your efforts in assisting town staff in the removal of the steel debris from the Souhegan River near Watson Park on August 29th and 30th. The removal of material allows for a safe swimming area for residents of Merrimack and surrounding towns. Your scuba diving skills enabled the town to perform removal operations of the steel in a safe and efficient manner. The fact that you volunteered your time for the cause is a great example of what makes the town of Merrimack so great. Thanks again for your time and assistance. And for the town citizens, I will say thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Okay, almost done. Future meetings. Thursday, September 22nd at 7 p.m. here in the Matthew Thornton Room, a regular Town Council meeting. Thursday, October 13th, again at 7 p.m. here in this room, the Matthew Thornton Room, another regular council meeting. And the next council meeting after that is Thursday, October 27th at 7 p.m., again here in the Matthew Thornton Room. And I'm done. Eileen.
Okay. As part of the Merrimack Fire Department's observance of Fire Prevention Week, we will hold our annual open house on Wednesday, October 5th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Merrimack Central Fire Station located at 432 Daniel Webster Highway. The open house is the department's way of showing the citizens who we are and what we do, as well as demonstrating our emergency capabilities, equipment, apparatus, stations, and personnel. The transfer station extended hours end tonight. Transfer station hours going forward are the normal Tuesday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. National Car Seat Check on Saturday, September 24th from 9 a.m. to noon at the police station. Thank you.
That's it. Okay, PFOA update. There's really not any new information, but the little we have is going to be presented during the PFOA discussion under new business number 1. However, the next section is I want to explain comments from the press and public. If you wish to make a comment about anything on the agenda, now is the time to make it. You have 3 minutes. You can come up, give your name and address, make a comment about whatever the agenda item is, because when the presentation or the agenda item is taken up, you will not have an opportunity to speak then. So if you'd like to make comments about that, now is the time to come up and make it. As everyone rushes. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on. Recognition, and that's why we're all feeling safe with all these police officers here. Doesn't everyone feel safe here? Yeah. Okay, recognition of full-time years of service of town employees. The one we're going to be presenting right now is Dennis Foley from the police department with a 30-year clock. And Chief Doyle, you're going to be saying a few words. And I'll come up.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Madam Chairperson, for your cordial introduction. And I was asked to keep my comments brief and short, but for somebody who's put 30 years of his blood and sweat and tears into this community, it's very difficult to try to condense it to just a few moments. What I'm going to tell you is just a little brief history of Dennis's employment with our department. Dennis started way back in 1986 when he, like me, came from Massachusetts to join this police department. Prior to joining the police department back in 1986 here in Merrimack, he was a part-time officer over in the Hampton Police Department. He received his associate's degree in liberal studies from Middlesex Community College. He was promoted to detective in July of 2007. He worked closely with a number of agencies, including the courts, juvenile services, and the schools, while a juvenile officer prosecuting cases in the district court, and worked with several state youth service organizations for troubled youth. In January of 2009, Dennis was promoted to sergeant and works now currently as an assistant squad commander. He works closely with the squad lieutenant to exercise leadership and perform administrative responsibilities for the people within his charge on his squad. Dennis has also worked as a member of the Attorney General's Drug Task Force for several years and worked closely with members of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, HIDTA, and state police and other municipal and city agencies to combat the drug problem in our state. He's also worked as a field training officer, a bicycle patrol officer, ATV officer, and he right now is currently responsible for maintaining much of our department's equipment, including the AEDs as well as our radar units. Dennis also served in several leadership capacities as a union officer in both the IBPO and the NEPBA, and he's one of our department's representatives throughout the country, I might add, when it comes time to attend those unfortunate circumstances where fellow officers are killed and struck down in the line of duty. He's here tonight with his wonderful wife, Dee, where she is right here, a fellow runner, I might add, and a wonderful person. Needless to say, Dennis has been intimately involved in the department and the community. He volunteers regularly for Special Olympics, helps coordinate the union annual food basket delivery program. He puts them together at the station, then reaches out to the community and actually delivers the food baskets around the holidays. And I've actually had the opportunity and the fortunate opportunity to participate with Dennis and several other members of the department in those events. And I can tell you right now, seeing Dennis act in that capacity, I can tell you that nobody is more compassionate than Dennis when it comes out to helping his fellow man. Dennis, and this is illustrated in a couple of anecdotes that I want to talk about fairly quickly. Dennis really was our police department's rock back several years ago, 2 years ago, when we lost one of our own, Sergeant Ed Payne, to ALS. He was Ed's friend to the end, and Dennis showed the importance of what the words friendship and family really mean during Ed's final days when he stood vigil beside Ed and Ed's family. Dennis is also a consummate family man, and Dee will be able to attest to this. We've seen Dennis raise his kids and care for compassionately the members of his family as a dad and the members of his family as a member of our department. He's a person of unmitigated character, and I just want to relate one other story. Some of you may have already heard this that will illustrate this a little bit more clearly. And this happened several years ago when Dennis was working on Christmas Eve night. It was really a quiet evening, and for the most part, many of us would say, those of us in the profession, it was just a typical night. We had our motor vehicle accidents, our motor vehicle complaints, a couple of domestic calls, and one of those domestic calls actually stood out. And it's a story which I won't soon forget, because Dennis and several officers responded to that domestic complaint. And when he arrived, he found a young couple with 2 little kids. And the parents, he found out, were arguing because the children were visibly upset. And Dennis had asked the question, why is this happening tonight, of all nights? Dennis calmed the situation down, only to find out that the parents were arguing because they were frustrated they didn't have any money to buy any gifts for the children, both less than 6 years old. But Dennis knew what had to be done. He wasted no time doing it. He spoke with his lieutenant, asked if he could do something to this family in need. And right away, he told the young couple that he'd be checked back, and he'd be back in just a little bit prior to the end of his shift. And then the officers left with Dennis. Dennis went right to work. Like an elf on Christmas Eve, he took up a collection from his fellow officers who were on duty, a donation from the union, and then just like Santa showed up at the door a few hours later with gifts and a cruiser sleigh full of gifts for those kids, the kids who otherwise would have gone without Christmas several years ago. Now, those children may never ever know who that officer was. They may never ever recollect who those officers were, but they will always never forget how those officers made them feel that night. And Dennis's example that night is something that we at the police department will never forget, and I'm proud to know Dennis and continue to know Dennis for the past 30 years. And I think that kind of illustrates his commitment not only to his profession, but his commitment to serve the members of our community. So Dennis, congratulations on 30 years. Thank you, Chief. I'm proud to be honored. My wife will find a place to put it.
I'm just going to say a few words, and then
Okay,
you're going to have it.
absolutely.
Now I want you. Very few words, and I say it every time, so it's redundant. But I want to say it every time that we represent the citizens of Merrimack. And for the citizens of Merrimack, I want to thank you for providing security and safety for us, as well as all the police officers in this town for 30 years. And congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I didn't really prepare anything.
All I can tell you is that I've always believed in family, and I've always been a family person, and I've reflected that in my job, not only out in the field, but with, as you can see, my other extended family. I couldn't do it without these guys. Merrimack is very fortunate for the policemen that serve our community and the citizens. We do a great job, and we will continue to do a great job. And I love these guys. Thank you.
They want to shake yours.
Congratulations.
Thinking I'm the best of them.
Congratulations, Officer Foley, and I know the rest of the police department want to stay here for the rest of the meeting. I know that's to be true.
You don't have to.
Go enjoy your party. They're not here, but I'll mention their names. Just giving everyone a minute to be able to escape. Thank you, everybody. Okay, there are other employees who are also going to be recognized, but they were unable to come here tonight, but I do want to mention who they are. Jason Marcella from the fire department will be receiving a 20-year plaque. Gary McGrath from the Public Works Wastewater is going to get a 20-year plaque. And Jeff Strong from Highway is also going to be getting a 30-year clock. So congratulations to everyone. Okay, appointments. Did you want to say something? I did do Marcella. Yes, I did. That's all right. I can use the help. Don't worry about it. This time I did. Okay, appointments, none. Public hearing, none. Any legislative updates from state representatives? I don't see any present. Town managers report.
Okay. The Department of Public Works is pleased to announce the hiring of our new roads and bridges foreman, Greg Blacharzik. Sorry, Greg, for butchering your name, but he will be replacing Bruce Moreau, who just came in a few weeks ago to get a rocking chair. The wastewater treatment facility is on record pace for compost sales this year. They have marketed over 12,000 cubic yards already, and the busy fall season is still to come. Thank you.
I did forget to announce, but I'll do it now. Jackie Flood is excused from this meeting tonight. Okay, and that's particularly for the person who's taking the notes. So, okay, next on the agenda. There is no consent agenda. Old business. Chief Doyle. Oh, he stepped out. We caught him. We can go ahead and do the number 2. We'll do number 2, Paul.
Is there a discussion on this one?
Well, he still has to. We'll do number 2. Matt, you ready? We'll just switch it around. That'll teach him to leave. Okay, dog park update submitted by Parks and Recreational Director Matt Kasparius and Public Works Director Kyle. Matt is here to present the information.
The long-awaited dog park.
The Town Council to be presented with an update on the proposed dog park at Wasserman Park, as well as to consider the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $3,803.15, which is the difference from what was approved by the Council at their September 10th meeting, and to consider the use and expenditure of the timber proceeds in the amount of $14,727.12 pursuant to RSA 31:95-B and Charter Article 8-15. Go ahead, Matt. You lose.
Good evening, everybody. As you already alluded to, we are here to talk about the dog park, and we finally have some good news after much delay. As you know, last spring we went out for our initial bid on the park, and the prices came out much higher than what we were expecting. So working with the dog park committee and Kyle Fox from Public Works, we went through, we made some adjustments to our design, put the project back out, which those adjustments brought the project back down to kind of where we were hoping it to come in.
Eileen?
I just think that if I'm cutting you off before you were going to say something, I'm sorry, but the adjustments basically were that the fence was going to be 6 feet and now it's 5, right?
Yep.
And the second thing is that the ground cover is different, which was very expensive. So the size of the dog park is still going to be the same, correct?
That was my
Okay.
next sentence, but that's okay. So yeah, the overall size and configuration of the dog park will remain the same as it was, and will feature both the large dog area and the small dog area. We'll still have the erosion controls and drainage system that was part of the original plan, prevent anything from reaching down to the lake. But as Eileen just said, we originally were looking at a 6-foot fence, and we've lowered that down to 5 feet. And then initially, we were looking at covering the entire dog park in stump grindings. And it was just, as you said, very expensive, and something we couldn't do at this point. What we will be doing, we'll be removing basically the top layer, all the pricker bushes and the small stumps and that kind of thing. So it'll basically be a soil surface. So you'll have some dogs with muddy paws and that kind of thing for the time being. And we'll, get the idea was obviously to get the park built, and then, if the committee wants to proceed with that in the future, that's still an option to us down the road. But yeah, those were kind of the two main changes that we needed to make to bring it down to where we needed it to be. As you mentioned earlier, we are looking for 2 motions tonight. One which was to authorize and accept and expend the $3,830.15 that was raised in the past year, that was above the $30,000 that was approved last September. And the other one was we are looking to request the use and expenditure from the timber proceeds from the tree cutting that was done at Wasserman Park 2 years ago, in the amount of $14,727.12. With those, if we get those approvals tonight, the contractor has stated that he will be able to begin building the park with the idea that it opens this fall before the snow comes in. It also gives us the paperwork that we need, or the approvals that we need to submit for the reimbursement from PetSafe itself.
Nice. So we do need 2 separate motions.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions or discussion? Yes, Finley?
Thanks, Matt. I was wondering, you lowered the fence from 6 to 5, which, now that I'm thinking about it, after you've spoken about it, is there a reason we go 5? Are all dog parks normally 5 or 6 feet in height?
Yes, yeah, generally they're 5 or 6, and the thought process from us, trying to go down to 4 was that it would be too low, and then you'd have more of a dogs jumping out, which might end up having issues with, knocking fence posts over and, maintenance of the fence itself. So I think 5 and 6 is kind of the standard.
Oh, I'm good. I was just thinking there could be more savings with 4, and they'd be having so much fun playing, they're not going to jump anyhow. But
Yeah.
I'm probably wrong, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions or discussion?
We run barbed wire across the top.
Tom?
One of the conditions we put on this were rules,
Mm-hmm.
and is that something you've taken care of or have that ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have that ready.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Yes, Fin?
Well, for people at home too, but could a ballpark date of opening for the people who are before snow?
That will be determined once I talk to the contractor, if it's tomorrow or next week, and then he can outlay the schedule more for me, so I can't give you the idea I have is fall at this point.
But your feelings, how
October,
would you
maybe?
say before Christmas?
I'd say October is the hope.
Okay.
Yes,
It's about
Bob?
a 6 to 8 week construction period, depending on the weather, and when we can get put into his schedule and how busy he is right now.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Good, okay.
Okay, nothing else. Entertain 2 separate motions, please.
Madam Chairman, I move to authorize the acceptance and expenditure of $3,830.15 of donated monies for the Merrimack Dog Park pursuant to RSA 3195B and Charter Article 8-15.
Seconded.
Motion made by Tom Mahon, seconded by Bill Boyd. All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 600. And second motion?
Madam Chair, I would move that the town council authorize the use and expenditure of the timber proceeds in the amount of $14,727.12 for the Merrimack Dog Park.
Second?
Second.
By Dan Dwyer. Bill Boyd, motion, second by Dan Dwyer. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Or was it you, Tom? I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I heard incorrectly.
No, I was going to say something.
Oh, well, go ahead before I finalize.
Well, okay, so I was just hoping you'd tell us a little more about the timber activities. What area did it cover, and where is this money coming from, and how did that proceed?
Can you answer that better than I can, Paul?
Okay.
Back about 2 years ago, the council authorized a selective cut down at Wasserman Park. There was about an acre of land, which is the dog park, that was clear cut, and the timber, those trees were valued at about $2,800 that we received from the gentleman who did the job. The remaining about 12 acres of land that goes from Natticook Road on the right-hand side of Matt's office all the way down to Natticook Lake, the remaining 12 acres of land were selectively cut, and timber was brought out of there, and at about $11,800 worth of value of timber that we received at the time of the cut. These two projects were done simultaneously, and everything's been finalized with the state and the records, and we have received this money.
Okay. And presumably that went well and has started to grow, settle down and things like that. Wasn't there an effort to put in a Frisbee park or something like that, or?
There is, and they've run into some roadblocks that they haven't expected, and so it's still in the works, but they haven't made a whole lot of progress.
Okay, but this might have helped to open up the area for them to put
Yes.
that in? Okay.
Yes.
And what we're talking about right now is to take that money and instead of allocating it to Parks and Rec in general, to actually physically allocate it to the dog park?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to
That's fine.
make sure that was clear to people, where that was coming from.
That's fine. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. 6-0-0. Okay, I believe that's it, Matt. Thank you.
Matt, thank you.
You snooze, you lose.
Want to go back in order, or you want to keep going?
I'll go with Chief.
I don't think Matt.
Remember who said that? What's your license number?
Don't be driving in town.
Chief Doyle, would you please come on down?
I have a car that says assistant chair or something on it.
Proposed change to Chapter 183 Vehicles and Traffic. This is the final reading. The Town Council to consider the proposed change, and I'll let you go ahead and present it.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I have some handouts I'd like to pass out relative to information that we've received since the last meeting last month that might, and I want to talk to these issues, the couple that came up last month, so. The reason you're getting these now is only because I received them this morning from Don, the new DPW Public Works engineer, and Kyle, the Director of Public Works, who spent some considerable time trying to research the issues. And I think if you recall, the issues relative to this were, I think, twofold. One was regarding boundary lines of the resident who lives right at the corner of Island Drive and DW Drive, and the sightline issue that was compounded by the bushes that kind of encroach onto DW Drive. Well, let me back up a little bit before I get into this, and I just want to kind of refresh everyone's recollection of what it is we're doing tonight. We have the final reading relative to a proposed change to Chapter 183 Vehicles and Traffic. Very simply, it's an addition to subsection 31, Schedule 4, stop intersections. Our proposal, and this is predicated upon the recommendation by the Highway Safety Committee back in our June meeting, that we add a stop sign at the intersection of Island Drive and DW Drive. The sign would actually be erected on Island Drive and facing the traffic coming from Island Drive onto Daniel Webster Drive as you travel westerly. That sign, as you recall, during our discussion last meeting, is actually in place now and has been in place, I believe, since about the first or second week of July. Referring to the diagrams that I've passed out, flip over to the very back page. It's a photograph of that sightline issue that I wanted to address initially, and then we'll talk about the boundary line and my discussion with Director Fox this morning. This picture that you're looking at right now, I took just after the meeting we had last month, and it actually depicts the view as you sit at the current location of the stop sign that has been erected on Island Drive, looking southerly or to your left onto Daniel Webster Drive. That photograph also depicts the actual corner of the property that Mr. Murray owns right there on the corner of DW Drive and Island Drive. As you can tell, because of the bushes that are right there, the ones that we had discussed at the last meeting, really impinge upon the sight distance. As a matter of fact, from that point, you can probably see only maybe 15 to 20 feet up Daniel Webster Drive, which really was one of the things that was really concerning to the resident who brought it to our attention at the Highway Safety Committee back in June. Is because of that sight distance, although I should say lack of sight distance, there's a proclivity for vehicles to come down there, and because there was no stop sign, there was no requirement for residents on Island Drive to stop before they moved into that intersection. And it was because of this design issue that we had recommended that the stop sign be erected. It would force those residents to stop, take that extra moment to make the look, and then proceed slowly out into the intersection, and hopefully give them at least enough time to react accordingly if in the event they found some kind of risk or danger or hazard existing at that point when cars came back into their line of sight. Now, there was some talk and some chatter amongst the members of the council and the Director of Public Works at the last hearing that we had, the public hearing, regarding whether we can do anything about those bushes that encroached onto Daniel Webster Drive. So Dawn, the newest engineer who's been since hired, did a lot of research for us, and she actually did the deep dive way back to looks like 1948 to look into the Registry of Deeds to find this information. She found out that, interestingly enough, there's a portion, if you look at the first page of the handout that I just sent around, that portion of DW Drive that includes the bushes is entirely on Mr. Murray's property.
Mr. Okay.
Now, what Kyle said was, and this is well above where I am in my profession, he said it's called a prescriptive easement. I assume that means that somehow, somewhere along the line, either by virtue of longevity or otherwise, the town has been granted some kind of right to use that as a public way of some sort, regardless of whether it's on his property or not. I don't know. That's my understanding of how this prescriptive easement works. So we've been using it.
The prescriptive easement has to be maintained and notoriously used for a certain period of time as well.
And it seems like it has been.
And I would agree with that.
It does.
Yep.
The bottom line, though, is those bushes that we talked about are entirely 100% on Mr. Murray's property, so it really restricts us on our ability to compel him to have them cut back and or remove them ourselves. And that becomes more of a complication, if you will, relative to any other alternative associated with using the stop sign or otherwise. The second diagram was one that she provided as well, which I think came from, the Registry of Deeds, that shows a little bit more clearly, absent the architectural rendering or the engineering rendering of the lot lines and the actual depiction of where Daniel Webster Drive exists along his property line. So we're here again to just give you that update. I know that because it was some discussion, and I wanted to include this as part of our discussion tonight and as part of the minutes moving forward. So that clarification is now out there. And again, I did thank Kyle and his team and his staff for bringing this to my attention so that we could have it tonight for our meeting. And I certainly am available to answer any questions or try to answer any questions that you might have relative to this new information.
Okay, questions? None? Go ahead. You look.
Well, I'm perplexed because I don't know what a prescriptive easement really means, and you've obviously don't either, or you wouldn't have started your comments that way. So it's curious how, because those bushes are encroaching out on the asphalt, which is part of the road that's been there for a long time, does a prescriptive easement somehow restrict how far out those bushes can go? And is there some point in time or some place? We obviously can't discuss that here. We don't have the right people, but it'd be worth looking into understanding just how much that easement does control the ability to set up a visual line of sight along that intersection.
No, and good point. I think we had that, at least a brief discussion to that point with Kyle about what alternatives we have, regardless of what the legal restrictions are. I think Mr. Murray seems approachable to a certain degree to do what he would like to have done. He certainly doesn't want them removed because he likes to have that little bit of buffer between him and Daniel Webster Highway, and we certainly get that. I think he's amenable to having them trimmed back to allow more of a line of sight that would allow those folks coming out of Island Drive to have at least more of a sight line for vehicles that may be coming down Daniel Webster Drive too. So we're going to be looking more into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that the town council adopt the change to Chapter 183 Vehicles and Traffic of the Town Code pursuant to Charter Article 5, Section 5-4.
Second? Second. I have a finger. Who said second? Dan? Motion made by Bill Boyd, second by Dan Dwyer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Opposed. 2. Okay, so it's 4-0. Tom Koenig and Tom Mahon in opposition.
Just a quick question for the chief. Is DW Drive one-way coming southbound?
At that point, it is.
At that point, it is?
Yes, it's one way. You can't turn left.
That's what I thought.
You
Okay.
can't turn left from Island Drive onto DW Drive and exit out onto Daniel Webster Highway that way.
But once you make the right, that's actually two-way traffic on that side of,
On the right-hand side,
on the
yes.
right-hand side. Okay. Thank you.
I think there's a do not enter sign or something up there to stop you from going through those.
Okay,
Yeah.
while you're here, and I
Yes.
don't think it's going to take long,
Right.
and you're going to owe me, you have a donation item that's in the new business.
It's actually Captain Albert has a donation.
Well, then
so
he
we can
owes
do it
me.
last, right? Is that what you're saying?
But I'll share the seat with Captain
Throwing it
Albert
right
if you'd
under
like
the
to
bus.
jump right up here.
Donation, these are usually very quick, so don't prove me wrong, guys. Donation acceptance for the Merrimack Police Department. Town Council to consider the acceptance and expenditure of a donation of $289.42 raised by the campers at Wasserman Day Camp for the Merrimack Police Department's K-9 unit. And I'll let you go right ahead.
Well, good evening. Earlier this, well, I should say last month, early August, the campers ran a penny drive at the Wasserman Day Camp and raised $289.42, and they chose to donate that to the department's K-9 unit. This is just after Gunny came over and did a demonstration for all the kids, and apparently he made quite an impression. And that, with the help of the counselors and the staff at the camp, they chose Gunny to be the benefactor in this case, or the K-9 unit. So we're asking that the council accept this donation.
Excellent.
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion made by Tom Koenig and seconded by Bill Boyd. Any comments, questions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? No one would dare. 6-0-0. And thank them. Obviously, I know you send out thank you notes, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Remember, you owe me. Okay, new business. Merrimack Water Contamination Petition Discussion, submitted by James Bollinger, but I have been informed that he's unable to come tonight. But we have a Mr. Terry Anderson, Ms. Carol DiPiero, who are going to be doing the presentation, so. Just you? Are you Mr. Anderson, obviously?
I'm Mr. Anderson, yes. Carol's son had an accident on the soccer field today. It was an emergency room, so she's not going to
Oh,
be able to join
well,
us
that's a
today.
good excuse, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So she does send her
I'm sorry for
regrets,
her
as
troubles.
well as Jim. Jim wanted to be here.
Yeah.
He had a commitment. He couldn't make it tonight, so.
Excellent. Okay, just before we do this, let me introduce the subject matter,
Sure.
and then it's going to be all yours.
Sure.
Petition to the Town Council for action in relation to public and private water contamination by St. Cobain Performance Plastics. Now, there was a lot of paperwork that you submitted, which
Sure.
is fine. Part of it had to do with an online petition
Correct.
that had names of residents in Merrimack, out of Merrimack, and there was a lot of paperwork. In order to facilitate this, I just wanted to be able, I believe that there are 5 things that you're requesting from this council, okay? And
Okay.
what I'd like to do is just, and that doesn't mean you don't address them, you will,
Sure.
but I just want to set the stage, because that's the focus, that will be the presentation.
Absolutely.
And that has to be the focus that this council identifies and speaks about. First one was St. Cobain, you're requesting the St. Cobain fund all filtration for contaminated MVD wells and private wells.
Correct.
Number 2, that you're requesting blood tests for all residents. Number 3, you want St. Gobain to pay for all private filtration systems already installed by residents.
Correct.
Number 4, you're suggesting that we seek support from the governor and New Hampshire legislators. And number 5, you see, I'm reading my little notes. I have to read my own notes. Hire an attorney to investigate legitimacy of MVD's legal authority to operate. And you list an RSA.
Right.
And if it is determined to be illegitimate, possible town manager assuming control and oversight under the supervision of the town council. Is that a reasonable summary?
Those are reasonable. yes,
Okay,
yeah, sure.
so we know that that's the jumping off point for you as well as for us.
And,
So
and
go
we
for it.
recognize
Go for it.
We recognize those are a lot of ask. So obviously, I'll go through a few points here and try to.
Absolutely. It's all, you've got the floor now.
So just a little history on who we are. We're actually part of a citizen group. We're called the Merrimack Water Contamination Action Group. We're here to educate ourselves. We are passionate. We are not tree huggers. This water is life. Water is essential. It's essential to you as a person. It's essential to us as a healthy community. So that's our focus, right? So I'm going to walk through a few points about the contamination crisis, and I do call it a crisis because we recognize it's a problem, but it's a problem with a need for an urgent resolution, we believe. And then we have a few requests, and you already mentioned those requests. But before I actually walk through those, the primary thing we're actually looking to this council for and this body is leadership, right? There are a lot of people involved, NHDES, Health and DHHS, we have MVD involved, we have a lot of people involved, but this is the sole body that can actually act. We are the only, Merrimack is the only town that's actually impacted here. Litchfield is a byproduct of what's going on here, but it is our responsibility. And I think this council's responsibility to take the leadership role. So I just want to go through a little history so everybody is kind of level set. In February of this year, St. Gobain's notified NH Department of Environmental Services that they detected PFOAs at about 30 parts per trillion inside their facility. And they're served by the Merrimack Village District water supply. In response, on March 9th of this year, NHDES collected samples from 3 operational wells. We have 6 operational wells. We had 6 operational wells at that time. One had maintenance and 2 others had construction activity. So wells 2, 4, and 5 were tested. And what they found is that a low of 17 parts per trillion of PFOAs were detected at well 2, and a high of 90 was detected at well 4. And well 5 fell somewhere in between. On the 26th of May, MVD actually issued a report entitled MVD PFC Progress Report, Next Steps, essentially citing and making it public that PFC contamination did exist in the water system and indirectly pointing to St. Gobain's as the culprit. And then shortly after that, on June 8th, NHDES actually ordered MVD to actually, the term was lock out and tag out wells 4 and 5. So essentially took those offline. Our water supply is offline now. To this date, it's offline until filtration can be applied.
Just to correct, I believe 5 was already locked out though, right? Was it
It
5? One of them was.
It may have been offline at the time, but the order to actually
Correct.
tag
To
and not bring
permanently
those back
tag 'em.
online.
Gotcha.
Depending on what was going on, those wells are active and inactive.
Right.
Again, wells 4 and 5 are off. MVD sent a letter to St. Gobain's, basically a general service agreement, asking them to pay for a treatment design, a preliminary design, really the engineering resources to put a design in place and asking St. Gobain's to pay for that, right? They felt like St. Gobain should take some responsibility. On July 1st, St. Gobain's responded and denying responsibility for polluting wells 4 and 5. In fact, blaming it on the long gone Longa
Longa.
landfill, right? So, and they cited their own consultants with that. And this is really where the trail of communication stopped. On the 6th of July, NHDES requested from St. Gobain's copies from their consultants to say, tell me your study, how did you reach this conclusion, and also asked for some follow-up meetings between them and MVD and St. Gobain's. That's where really the trail of communication stopped. I didn't find anything past that point. Now, NHDES has been really good about testing. In fact, they've tested, I don't know exactly, but hundreds and hundreds of wells, because as a result of this, most of the private wells have been tested. A lot of private wells have been tested. And especially those around the St. Gobain's area, they've tested, many have tested above 400 parts per trillion. Again, these are private wells that people have been drinking out of for a long time. And some as high as 2,500 parts per trillion. Again, the EPA has set a guideline today at 70 parts per trillion or below. So way above those guidelines.
Just to let you know, we do have some answers for you, but I'll wait till you're done.
Okay.
There's some correspondence that we received.
Oh, very
will
good.
help address
Very
that.
good. I just went on the site
That's all
and
right.
have not seen it.
Absolutely.
Further, between NHDES and Health and Human Services, they actually set some guidelines. They basically set a perimeter of 1.5 miles to provide bottled water, testing of wells, although NHDES has actually tested beyond those perimeters, and allow blood tests for just those people within that perimeter. So that's I think still in effect today, as far as I know. So again, wells 4 and 5 are shut down, right, until adequate filtration is put in place. But I want to focus on the other wells. So we still have 4 active wells. We have 2, 3, 7, and 8. 1 and 6 have been offline for a long time for other reasons. I took a look did my own data analysis here, just took a look at the recent reports. So they've been testing these wells about 3 times a month. So I looked at the latest was July. It took 2, 3, 7, and 8. Took an average across those and came up with a number of what the average PFC contamination in those wells are. And in the same report, we have the testing from our local town. So I want to make sure that people are understanding this. Based on those averages as I compare to our other town supplies, we are 17% higher than the Pennachuck source serving Amherst. We're 439% higher than the Pennachuck source serving Litchfield, 511% higher than Pennachuck serving Nashua, 817% higher than the source serving Bedford Water Company, and 511% higher than the Manchester Water Works, which serves Manchester and Londonderry. So if you look at that, I mean, this town, regardless of what you want to set the limits are, we are well above any of our surrounding towns. So there have been questions, do other towns see this? Well, not within our area.
Now, this is just MVD. What are you talking about?
This
From the
is
MVD wells.
yeah, only those 4 wells. And this, again, these are the wells that we are being served by today.
Gotcha.
It doesn't include 4 and 5.
Right.
PFCs have been linked to many health conditions. Get arguments from health officials on both sides of this, but it's been linked to bladder cancer, colon cancer, testicular cancer, low immune function, low birth weight, increased insulin-dependent diabetes, high cholesterol, and the list goes on. Now, the studies are early. They do draw a very high correlation between those health conditions and exposure to PFCs. But what we've actually seen from our own DHSS is minimizing those risks. And in public forum, they seem to tend to say it's not a health issue. It is not a health issue. And technically it's not. As a side note, we have a town, Hoosick Falls, maybe you guys know about it. St. Gobain's also has a plant there. They're about 2 years ahead of us, maybe a year and a half ahead of us. A lot of litigation going on. Those folks have been actually advised, after a long period of time, to not drink the water, not bathe in the water, don't brush your teeth with the water, don't cook with PFOA contaminated water. That's what's now, early on, they were not given that advice. It's coming to a head now. People that did not advise them, the health officials there are under a microscope now. And this week, Senator Schumer of New York actually asked that Hoosick Falls be declared a Superfund site, which means that they get federal funds to help get this cleaned up, and then the federal government can go after whoever is the culprit, in this case, probably St. Gobain's again. One other kind of complication here is that blood tests, because there's not conclusive tests, the medical industry does not recognize it, are not covered by insurance. So if you have been living in this town for 20 years, drinking the water, and you don't live within a 1.5 mile radius, it's on you to get the blood tests. They're expensive. Insurance is not going to cover it. And one other point around sort of the disease aspect, actually, you may be familiar with PEAS. PEAS is having a similar issue. They have a PEAS Community Assistance Panel, call it CAP. They're actually working for the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registration. This week they met to actually create a feasibility study to understand the impacts of health within that population, to really start to get a better handle on the exposure to PFOAs and what's really happening. And that happened this week. In addition to the health concerns, though, as a town, we have to be concerned about sociological, economic, and political ramifications. People can make a choice of where they live, and I just gave you some statistics, right? Those statistics would tell me, if you're going to move to a town here, you have a choice. Is it going to be Merrimack, or is it going to be one of the other towns that doesn't have this issue? And water's an important part. Businesses and restaurants that serve water, cooking water, they're either going to have to figure out a filtration system on their own, use bottled water, or just tell their customers, hey, I'm using the town water that's loaded with PFCs. And potential real estate values, again, using Hoosick Falls as an example, they're even having issues refinancing homes there. Real estate values is a real concern, especially as the word gets out. And again, I mentioned well 6, without filtering, and we have 4 and 5 down, without actually having a plan to get those filtered, we may be without that water supply, and that water supply is critical to this town. I mean, we're getting by on the ones we have, but at some point, you know, we'll need more water, and until we get those back online, and well 6 has been down since 1989 due to contamination from Merrimack metal.
I think that's
metal
online
industries.
now.
Huh?
I think it's not.
No, it's actually part of the Superfund.
They
Is
were
it?
going to.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the other one that they did the magnesium
What?
filtration
Right,
on.
yeah.
One.
They were
That
going
was
to.
one? Okay.
They were going to do something with well 6, but the commissioners felt that there wasn't enough.
Capacity.
No, there was too much for what the levels they were detecting. There was too much. They felt there was too much of a risk to put it back online, and their caution paid off because later something else showed up.
Yeah, and it was a different contaminant.
Yeah.
It was VOCs versus PFOAs.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And,
right.
and
I
Superfund
remember that.
did do the cleanup at that
At the
property,
site.
but I don't think they felt the water was.
I was thinking
was-
of the other one.
So
that they
again,
did.
that's a risk.
Sorry.
That's a risk that we should be concerned with, right?
Yeah.
Without getting this up. And I'll add one more thought here is that we don't know that we've seen the worst of the contamination. We haven't, to my knowledge, haven't seen core samples of the ground down to our water levels. We've seen topsoil samples of where it's leached down to, but we may be taking in PFOAs that have been distributed through from 20 years ago that has just finally reached the water supply. We don't know that it's reached its pinnacle yet. Could get worse. Maybe it'll get better. I don't think the science so far, at least the testing, is showing us it's getting any better. So, you know, Our position is that the water should be filtered. It should be filtered for all wells, public and private. And I think one of the remedies, at least for Litchfield, is they're trying to put those guys on Pennachuck water today because there's a lot of private wells there. It might be a good suggestion here as well. Due to long-term ingestions of PFCs, we want to make sure that people, and these are some of the things we've already talked about, we want to make sure people do have access to blood tests. An arbitrary, I think it makes sense to draw a circle and test the wells within the 1.5 mile area. Doesn't make sense that that this water gets distributed throughout the town, it's limited to that 1.5 mile radius, right? Because people that have been here for 20, 30 years drinking this water that might they may have lived there at one time, they need to have access to the blood test as well. And again, we believe that this cost should be transferred to St. Gobain's. We believe they are the culprit. I think there's good evidence to that, and we know we're going to have to fight to prove that, but that is what we'd like to see. And so back to the actions, and I know you already articulated those, but I'll kind of go through those again. And I'll add one here, and I've mentioned it up front. We obviously recommend litigation if needed, or some action that this body takes against St. Gobain's, right? Be involved. We know DES is involved. We know that there are other folks involved, but this group, and I know you've been involved with the governor as well on this action. But again, if I was going to make a motion, I would make a motion that you guys actually, one of you guys, raise your hand, volunteer, appoint one of you to be the lead for this. I think it's an important enough issue to this town to have an advocate, to have a lead, to have a liaison to the community that is the person that is going to sort of carry the flag and make sure that this stays on track. And we're happy to participate with that. We have a group, and some of my colleagues are back here. We have great research. We're digging in everywhere we can. We're reaching out. We've made contact with Hoosick Falls, with Pease. We actually have kind of spread our wings and are really on top of this issue. So we're happy to jump in. We obviously know this is not a well-paying job. You guys are mostly volunteers here, and so we want to be a part of it. But we do ask that from a leadership perspective, perhaps you guys can either appoint somebody or somebody volunteer to take the lead, and we know who that is, that we can work with them. Again, we've talked to MVD, we've talked to DES, but again, I think this is the body that can actually help us. I do have some other things, but I wanted to, and I know I'm taking a lot of time, I do appreciate your attention. I wanted to actually just read a few of our raw comments. So we did issue the petition that you talked about. And just so you guys get a sense for what people are saying, we just copied and pasted these, so these are exact words, and if I stumble through them, it's because their grammar wasn't that good, but I just want you to kind of get an idea of what people are saying. First of all, my children and I deserve clean, healthy water, especially when we pay for it. You know, this is unacceptable. My family of 6 have been drinking the water for 6+ years. I feel like I poisoned my family. I believe we have right to healthy drinking water that's free from contamination. If a company's business practice is proven too harmful to the environment and its inhabitants, then they should take steps to correct the issue and ensure it does not happen in the future. I have a 4-year-old child, and it's my job as a mother to protect her. Since this breakout, we've been buying bottled water. So just one other thought. That's really kind of the end, but one other thought, especially for children that grew up here. And I didn't grow up here. I've been here for 10 years. I think this is a great city. But especially for children that are growing up and have grown up here, they didn't even know this back 10, 20 years ago, and it's been in the water system that whole time. We've just discovered it because testing allowed us to discover it. So it's in the residents that have been here a long time, and it's important for us to take steps. The quicker we can stop the intake, the quicker our bodies can flush it out. I'm sure I'll be too old to actually get it out of my body, but at least we can give the younger generation a chance to be able to recover from this. Again, thank you for your time. I do appreciate you listening, and I do wish you can obviously consider the petition, but having a leader here that will kind of step up and be that, and again, we're happy to help out any way we can. So,
Okay, well, I do have some information, as I implied.
okay.
So let me give that to you.
Sure.
Before we open it up for discussion. In terms of the filtration for all wells and private wells contaminated, I do have some, literally it's almost hot off the press, September 7th. And this is documentation from the Merrimack Village District in response to St. Cobain's commitment letter, okay? The MVD believes that the St. Cobain good faith offer to pay $65,800 to complete the 30% engineering design for a treatment plant for MVD wells 4 and 5, along with St. Cobain's willingness to explore the possibility of providing the MVD with an interim granulated activated carbon treatment system, is a good step in the right direction to avoid any further delays to a permanent solution. However, we also need to reiterate that we believe that the temporary treatment of this well will be insufficient in the long term to adequately address the permanent treatment solution by the MVD to address the impairment of the quality associated with this contamination of the well sites. Please note that MVD does not consider your offer as a final settlement and anticipates your continued cooperation with plans for a timely resolution. So this addresses the wells 4 and 5, okay, that they've already offered, and they're going to go ahead and do an engineering design, and they've also offered to do an interim granulated treatment system. In the meantime, talking about a permanent solution.
Sure.
So that's part of the response. Okay. To also, I think there were 15 homes that had the private wells, and there are, it's not, oh yeah, here it is. This is a letter from St. Cobain to Eileen Carbonell, and this was dated August 18th, and that we plan to connect to the municipal water system a total of 15 homes on Daniel Webster Highway, Back River Road, Bedford Road, Maple Street, and Woodhaven Circles. Woodhaven, yeah. These homes currently use well water, which has been tested above the 70 parts per trillion for PFOA. Construction began this Monday, August 15, and is expected to be completed by September 30th. So those wells, just as an update for you, that have been determined to be above the 70 parts per trillion, they're being connected to MVD. Okay, that's just an update for you. Okay. Blood test for all residents. We'll talk about that in a moment. I have my own little notes here. Okay, in terms of hiring an attorney to investigate the legitimacy, we did some little research, and one of the things we decided, that information we received that helped us make a determination, is that the Department of Revenue Administration, would that be considered the state's IRS? Would that be?
In fact, it is.
Okay. They are acknowledging that MVD is the legitimate authority. So we have no ability to question their legitimacy.
Sure.
If the IRS doesn't, then you know what happens to us. We have nothing. In terms of the town council pursuing an action through class action litigation if necessary, we did consult our attorney. I wanted to know, what are our responsibilities and what's our abilities. And basically she's saying that we have no standing, and I'll read it. The question I asked was, does the town council have any legal standing to initiate a lawsuit? The answer is no. The MVD does. Unless the town hall or other town buildings or town-owned land are using water from the contaminated wells, then the town has standing only on those, but cannot represent citizens. So I guess my point is that we've isolated some of the issues. I've tried to acquire information in order to respond as best I could
Sure,
right
thank
now.
you.
And the bottom line is, we don't have any standing having to do with MVD. It's a totally separate entity. That doesn't mean, hopefully, that in the past, everyone knows we have been in contact with them, we express our opinions, we've encouraged them to be more transparent, to improve their public relations ability, all those things, but we have no ability to do anything more than that.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah, I understand that. I you know, the transparency is a big issue. I think we all know that, right?
And we've made that public. I've
The
even been
board
to their
meetings are
meetings and told them that.
4 o'clock there, so, you know, and I've attended, but I'm fortunate enough that I can. Most people in town can't stop what they're doing, their work at 4 o'clock and attend the meeting, so not very accessible.
Convenient.
Accessible.
The other thing I do want to update you about too, which you may know, but you might not actually, MVD just approved the construction of the pumping station at the, in fact, it's going to cost them $200,000 to hook. They already have a hookup at Pennachuck,
Sure.
but it won't supply the quantity if they need be.
Right.
So your concern about having limited water, that's being taken care of by that. So if for some reason there was a need to be able to have additional water into the system, that pump's going to take care of it. Also realizing that there is some mitigation that's going to have to go on between the two systems, because Pennachuck has their own water issues.
Sure.
They don't have PFOA, but they have other things. And the pHs are different, so that they have to do some, whatever it is, to be able to have compatibility between the two systems. Okay, but I just wanted to update you on that because I just became aware of it myself. That's approved, they're forwarding, and that's going to address your concern about limited water supply.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a solution, right? But it doesn't resolve our own town water issues, right?
Right. But your question about having the availability of enough water, that solves that.
Right.
It doesn't deal with the contamination issue. Okay, I believe I've addressed now. I'm opening it up to the council. Comments, questions for the gentleman, or Bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really curious to know, when you were citing those percentage differences between MVD and Pennachuck, I'm really curious to know how you arrived at those percentages, because when I looked at my notes and looked at the PFOA levels in Pennachuck versus what MVD is, the Pennachuck numbers are in single digits.
Right.
And the MVD digits are in the teens, as I would like
Sure.
to say.
Sure.
So I'm just curious, to me, when I do quick arithmetic in my head, I'm looking at a delta of,
The delta divided by the actual
by the actual,
number, which
and I
is.
get a much lower number than what you're arriving at.
I took an average. The average I came to was about 16.
Okay.
And that was over just the month of July. So I took the average of those 4 wells and used that as my starting point, and then I compared them. So you know, the pretty simple formula. The average of that minus the PFOAs of the other system divided by that gave me the percentage above.
And what's the
it's-
Pennachuck, is like 3 or?
Yeah,
One
they're
that I looked at was 5.8. I've seen another report where it's 3.
Yeah, and I took the latest report that was out on NHDES to do that. So, and to be fair, because they don't test those as often, so I
That's
took
right.
the latest one that they had to use that as a comparison. You know, again, I'm not saying it's exact science, but it is considerably higher. And we actually talked to the school board about a month or so ago, and there was one question: how does it compare to other towns? So there was this implication that perhaps we're not alone, that other towns are seeing this. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands this is a Merrimack phenomenon. This is unique to us, and it makes us different in our water quality, at least on that particular area, to other towns.
The one thing that I would share with you, and I had reached out to Nancy and Eileen because I wanted to call the state to follow up with my question that I asked at the meeting that I have with the governor, and I called their PFOA public inquiry line. Went right to voicemail, but I got a phone call less than 24 hours later. Responsive and answered my question regarding whether or not Health and Human Services would consider the random blood testing that I had been asking for.
I like that idea. It's a great idea.
And and I'm not going to lie to you, much to my surprise, the individual, Jeff Parrott, had communicated to me that they are trying to figure out how to make it work. They agree in concept of doing a random sampling to kind of at least illustrate to people that are on MVD, to some of the ratepayers, what people's blood levels are. So they're, obviously they're not going to do every single ratepayer, but they're willing to do a random sampling piece. They were still trying to figure out the logistical piece, and they are, according to my discussions with Jeff, and I talked with Jeff on Monday or Tuesday, that they're still actively trying to figure out how to make it work. They haven't said no yet, which to me
that's great.
Is a good thing.
I agree with that. That's good news. And I thought that was actually your idea when I heard you talk about it. I thought it was a great idea, and it gives you a better idea, especially for long-term residents that are outside, because the water doesn't stay within that area. It gets distributed depending on what wells are up and how it works through the system. So people on the south side could be exposed as much as the folks on the north side.
And the other thing, and I don't know if you read the Union Leader a couple of weeks ago, but the MVD had testified at the school board, and they basically said that if the ratepayers want to establish a lower PPT than 70, then present a warrant article and have it get voted upon. If it gets approved, and then it would be up to the commissioners to decide whether or not they're going to lower that PPT rate. So I think, and this is my analysis, and I could be wrong, but at least I believe in the back of their head, they may be considering that 70 might not be a good number. Sure. And even though they're using it right now, and that's, when you look at some of the stuff that they've talked about and how, the water, when they do the testing, it is below the EPA standard, and it's significantly below the new EPA standard. Sure. They're going to rely on that. So I think, from where I sit, if we believe we want to go as low as Vermont, or we believe we want to go to a non-detect level, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but whatever level you want to get to, I at least believe that if you present an article and it's approved by the voters with the water commissioners, they're going to listen. They're going to listen to what the voters want. So
and we will be at that next meeting to make that request, and we have as well. My concern is that they're going to accept it. They're going to regulate to what EPA says, and they've established that at 70 parts per trillion. I think we can. Well, maybe we won't all agree, but before then, 400 parts per trillion was the standard that they set for short-term exposure, not to drink this every day. If you look at that 400 to 700 where you're drinking it every day, it doesn't seem to me, at least as persistent it is in your system, is that not that much different. So I would hope that they subscribe to a much lower level. Vermont has set 20 parts per trillion. They're having litigation. They're being sued over that, but they've actually drawn that line in the sand.
But I would tell you, I would think moving forward until they actually, resolve their issues with Saint-Gobain and they actually have that filtration, the GAC filtration system in place, I think they're going to rely on that 70 parts per trillion as the gold standard.
And we're happy to address that with them. I'll add one other thought and agree. If Saint-Gobain's, I'm sorry, Saint-Gobain's is still expelling C6s. Somebody decided C6s are better than C8s. I don't know the science on it. Passes through your body. They can't detect it in the soil. We know it's there. It's being expelled. So they just exchange one for another. That's being distributed into our soil today. That might be something we're going to be looking at in 20 years from now. Just want to put that on the table as we start talking about filtration. We should be looking at higher standards than what EPA is saying today, because the science is not quite in on the health issues, and the fact there's a new contaminant that is now being distributed throughout the city, into our water supplies throughout our town, is something we should be concerned about. So I think we should be looking more than just what we know today, understand the vision of where this is going, and be proactive about it.
To jump on the bandwagon with you, Bill, I've done some consideration as well. And I would like to make a motion related to the random blood testing.
Okay.
And the motion would be for the town council to approve a letter to be sent to DES requesting a random sample study of, I put down 50, but maybe 100 MVD customers to be tested for PFOA levels at no expense to the customers.
Seconded.
Now, let me just speak to it. Very quickly, they're going to have to set criteria. I mean, obviously, you're not going to test someone, and, you know,
That
they
just
are the
moves it.
ones who have to decide it. There has to be criteria set, but they'll do that. They're not going to have someone who's lived here for 10 years do it. You need to get it. What you're addressing is when wells 4 and 5 were active over a period of time. So they're going to have to address that. But I think it's reasonable to be able to do a random sampling, and it's going to have to be voluntary and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't indicate what you can do with the results. But it will be interesting if it's inconclusive, if there's great diversity, then that answers your question. No, it's not the one thing. There'll be other variables that they're going to have to measure for as well. Previous exposure. I grew up in Cambridge, Mass. God knows what I was exposed to growing up. So, I mean, but that's their problem. That's not ours. But I don't think it's unreasonable to recommend to them that they initiate some sort of sampling to at least open the door to questions.
Thank you.
So that's my rationale. Go right ahead, Dan.
But it's what you just said, that you grew up in Cambridge and you don't know.
I probably
I
have
don't-
led up the yin-yang.
So I don't know what a random sampling blood test reveals.
It might reveal
It-
clusters.
It might reveal there's a non-connection because of people's past. I think of like a cigarette smoker, and whether they smoked when they were 15 and they quit when they were 50, and now he's 80 and has cancer. I just don't know.
I agree with
that
you.
the blood test is going to reveal factual information that ties loose ends. I
but
don't
that's
see it
not-
actually ever being tied into it. So I don't know if I can support that.
And that's okay. Let me think of it this way. Let's say you've got 10, let's just take 10 people to make it easy. And 2 have elevated PFOA and 8 don't. And the criteria is you've been exposed as much as you can control the variables. And there would be many variables you can't control. Then that pretty much says, well, it's probably not across the board. Versus all 10 of them have elevated PFOA at a certain level. That identifies a cluster which does not mean anything. All it means is let's look into it further. There would have to be further study to be able to see causation. And that's DHS, and that's Human Health and Human Services. To me, it's worth taking the chance to identify if there's a possibility of a cluster. If there is a cluster, then there's a whole bunch, and that's positive things. It doesn't solve the problem. It just is the first step to identifying if it's an issue, and that's all I'm saying.
But as your own words, after that was done, it's not on our hands anymore. It's in
That's
somebody
right.
else's.
That's
so
right. And that's their issue. But
I don't know what you do with that.
Well, I don't do anything with it. I'm just
But
expressing.
then you pass the ball to the
That's
DES
right.
or
That's
EPA
right.
and some other
That's right.
organization.
That's
And
right.
But Dan, Dr. Chan basically said that the half-life of PFOAs in a person's blood is 7 years, depending on chemistry makeup and the whole shooting match. It's not something that you can treat with amoxicillin or penicillin.
Right.
Okay, it's something that has to be worked out of the system. So I think it's important that if we do the random sampling, at least it's going to identify whether or not, to use Nancy's word.
First step only.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I'm just
No,
backing
no.
you up.
It's going to identify whether or not a cluster exists, or is it scattered all over the place. I mean, if you were to take, if you look at the testimony that was given back in March, and they talked about how PFOAs was an emerging contaminant. So prior to 2013, they didn't know what they had. So I would kind of respectfully disagree with the chairman, because if you're accepting the fact that the emerging contaminant is 2013, that means anybody that was drinking Merrimack Village District water potentially could have been exposed from 2013 moving forward.
That's okay. go ahead.
But I'm just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
the other flip of the coin is, for somebody like me who grew up in Medford, Mass, and God only knows what I experienced growing up in Medford, Mass, contrary to my wife, who was
Medford.
Born and raised and educated here in Merrimack, my wife would probably be the perfect volunteer for this particular study, because she grew up here. And she grew up here when, and God only knows what it was before ChemFab, but she grew up here and drank the water as, things progressed, General Electric. So I think you need to try and encourage people that have lived in town for at least more than 20 or 30 years for, in my eyes, for the sample to have any value or any benefit.
And again, we're not saying do it. We're suggesting they do it.
I'm suggesting the value.
Okay.
I'm suggesting the first things that struck me back in March, when it's in a polar bear's blood.
Right.
So these contaminants are on our whole planet Earth, and we're looking for the boogeyman who's contaminated our water supply. If it's in the blood of a polar bear, I'm at a loss at that point. The second thing that strikes me from March, from hearing from the scientists, is, and as you probably already know, you've done your homework, there are 70 contaminants, but they only test for, say, 30.
Sure.
This science so far is really baffling to find out where so if there's 70 contaminants, and the magic phrase is emerging contaminants that we don't even know about. So I'm I'm not on a panic button in my town of Merrimack. And I know several, maybe hundreds of people are.
Yes.
I am not. And based on all the information that I've read and gathered, I feel like I have more argument in a debate to prove that there isn't anything to fear. In one of your things in your letter, one of the things that you said number 2, we know PFOAs and PFOSs are found at high levels in all town wells, public and private. Well, what is your definition of high? Is it 17 parts per?
I'll set my bar at 20.
Okay.
So
and so I would challenge to say why 20? Because Vermont did it. And did you know? You'd have to do some research on why Vermont picked 20.
Absolutely.
From what we gathered, they picked it out of a hat.
Can I answer the question?
Well, I thought it was.
If you're asking me a question, let me answer the question.
Sure.
Yes, I did do the research on Vermont. I also, to your point earlier, I listened to what's going on in Pease, and I would recommend that as it's 2 hours. It's painful to watch, but they will go through the method that they use to determine what they do with the data and how they collect the data and how they ensure that the data has some integrity. Part of the challenge that we've had and why it's listed as an emergent contaminant is the studies have been inconsistent. But there's a high correlation. Hoosick Falls is a good example. They're going to do the study in Pease. And I'm just saying it's only contaminant because we're believe me, this is cigarette smoking in the 60s. And you have big corporations that are already trying to hide it, and they have a lot more information than we do. This actually emerged out of DuPont, finding high levels in their employees and reacting to it. They reacted to their employees to make sure they were taking care of those employees. They didn't care, or they didn't consider themselves with the contamination they were making, contributing to the local community, until people said, hey, if it's contaminating the employees, it's contaminating us. It's in our backyard. If this was a resident of Merrimack, or let's just say their taxes are, $200,000 a year, let's take 15 residents, and they were polluting our town at the rate this place was, they would be out of here. We would be kicking them out of here. There's no way we would accept that. Or they would be paying for what they're doing. So I'm telling you, do a little bit more homework. Look at that presentation from 2 days ago in Pease. Talk to the people there. they have people that are very well educated. They had Harvard grads. They're focused on this. There's science on it. It's emerging. It's an emerging contaminant. And I'm telling you, what we don't know today doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I'm not suggesting that it doesn't exist. I'm trying to suggest what is the emergency of what we're finding in the data. And back to your letter, when you're asking, you are stated, we know that the levels are high. So I need to know from your community, from your petition, what is your definition of high?
At least let's look at our surrounding communities and compare the differences there. I think that's a pretty easy concern. And let's take the health issues out. Again, if I'm moving to a town and I see this town has a higher level of PFCs or any contaminant, whatever it is, we're focused on this because we know it exists here. If I see that, maybe I'm gonna move to Amherst. It maybe costs a little bit more, but I'm gonna live there because the water's better. That's an issue that is exclusive of the health issues. People have a fear of it. People know it's out there. And this is only going to get worse. Again, pay attention to what's going on in Hoosick Falls. Pay attention to what's going on in Peace. It is getting to the point where it's already been accelerated in less than a week to Senator Schumer, to the Congress. They're going back into asking the governor of New York, what's happened here? So I'm going to tell you, this is not the end of it. We're not going away. We're going to address MVD. If you don't think it's an emergency, I appreciate your opinion. It's not mine.
And that's all it is. It's my own personal opinion. And so again, I'm going to ask you your personal number. At what point is the number too high for you to say that you'd feel comfortable drinking the water?
0.
That's what I was afraid you were going to say.
0.
Because zero cannot be accomplished if it. Sir, please.
Yeah.
0 cannot be accomplished if a polar bear has it in his blood. So I don't understand how the citizens who really put a lot of time and effort are thinking that their water supply will have 0.
You know what?
I want to reach a system that is reasonable. And so if the wells at the MVD have been showing that they're 12, they're 17, they're 30,
sure.
I'm asking, what is a reasonable number for our community to say, yes, these are the numbers that are acceptable to us?
Sure. PFOAs in the water serve no purpose except to get in your body and stay in your body for 7 years. They serve a purpose for manufacturing products. They serve no purpose in the water. They should not be there. And the fact is, we can filter it out to non-detect. It's possible.
There's
Absolutely.
some test. Hold on.
Yes.
The test that was previously used to measure PFOA. What was the number?
20.
No. There was the test was a number.
357 or 3.
Whatever.
Yeah.
They only evaluated to 20 parts per trillion. Anything below that was considered non-detect. Now they use the modified,
Absolutely.
which goes down to 5 parts per trillion. But for all that time, because that's a fairly new test,
Yep.
all these non-detects. So even when it was a non-detect, it might have been 17.
Listen, we can argue what that range
Absolutely
is.
right.
We can argue what that is, but it's lower than 70, in my opinion. It's certainly lower than 400. It's certainly lower than 2,500 that we're finding in other wells, right? And the fact is, we can filter it out. So we have the technology to filter out. It's not good for you. You can argue that point as well. But there serves no purpose being in your body. Why should it be there? We should have clean water. We can argue what that means, but it's a lot less than this. And we have a citizen of Merrimack, St. Gobains, that is contributing to this pollution. We should be asking them to pay for it and not put the burden on the taxpayers of Merrimack to make that happen.
And we have.
And we
The
have.
The town has asked them, and they have cooperated in putting in a filtration system. So that has been done.
And I've already mentioned the letters that we received that updated people about wells 4 and 5.
That is updated.
And
That's
putting the
news.
people who have the elevated contaminated wells on MVD. So those issues are being, and I think you have to acknowledge that does indicate a response by St. Gobain to that.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that.
And if I can add, the reason why I'm kind of pushing for a number is that if you want us to push for some type of action, then a number is really necessary. Like if we're going to invest or ask MVD to invest in a filtration system, it comes down to the science of testing, then we have to come to a conclusion of a number that's acceptable. And if your group is very strong on 0, I would say that's almost impossible to gain.
You know, you asked me what my opinion was.
It is impossible.
Well, it's not impossible, but
So think about it a minute. You're talking about 20 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
If I go to 1 part per trillion and then go below that to 0.1 or to 0.01 or to 0.001,
I don't think any of us are
I'm
scientists
still
here.
not
So I'm just doing what my research has told me. It's possible. It's definitely possible to get it to a lot lower rate than we are. So we can sort of leave that. Let me just tell you, there are other groups. Peace, for example, that's pushing on New Hampshire to set the levels lower. That's going through discussions today. Right now, it's set at 70. We hope that we'll get it lower. Whatever that outcome is, that's what we're going to have to live with. But I think this town can actually accept a lower rate and push MVD to actually push it down to a lower rate.
Most of all of our wells right now are at much lower than 70.
Have you looked at the recent data? Because it varies.
It does.
It varies, and it goes up and down.
It always will, sir. It will always vary for years to come.
We had at the consortium several months ago that we had right here. Eileen was there and Nancy was there, and I was just a passive observer. But there was actually a water analyst for Pennachuck that spoke, and they were talking about the vacillation of the numbers, and he says it could be 51 day, it could be 70. It's not.
You're looking for what the range is.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
sure.
So to
Over
me,
time.
if I'm in the teens over a period of 3 to 6 months, I think we're doing pretty good. But if you're going from 10 to 100 to 50 to 200 to back down to 5, then obviously there's something going on that should set off a red flag. But the larger question is, DES is responsible for enforcing 70 parts per trillion. If we ask MVD to impose a limit, and they agree to a limit, who's going to enforce the limit? Who's going to hold the MVD to the fire at whatever limit they decide to come up with? It certainly can't be us, because
We have no
authority.
I would expect if MVD actually accepted that limit, they would enforce it themselves, right?
One would hope.
One would hope.
One would hope.
That would be my.
Just to be the devil's advocate just for a moment, I think you have to be cautious when you're using Hoosick Falls. Hoosick Falls water supply was between 250 and 600 parts per trillion.
We've had wells in our town that's tested higher than that.
Well, we're talking about the main water supply, the municipal water supply in Hoosick Falls was between 250 and 600. You can't compare the apple of Hoosick Falls water supply to MVD's water supply of under 20.
Point in time.
Okay, but the caution is you can't use that, my opinion, as a legitimate argument, because those high levels of municipal water supply, there probably is a direct correlation with those high blood tests that they're receiving.
Absolutely.
I understand that, but hold on,
I'm
let me
sorry,
finish my
apologize.
thought. But when you're talking about, and we don't know what was in the past, I'm acknowledging that, and that's what my motion's about. But what the previous, when well 4 and 5 was on, okay, let's acknowledge we don't know that information. But we can't say it's comparable to Hoosick Falls.
Today.
And probably back then too, my personal opinion.
I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about the future. So we don't, you can do some scientific
That
analysis.
doesn't mean you still don't monitor. None of these discussions means you still don't monitor.
Perhaps that
DES
should be
is not
another
gonna
motion that we ask. Persistent monitoring, right? We have it today.
I think DES is going to do that. I think, my personal opinion is that I think DES has been pretty darn good.
Absolutely. I couldn't
And
agree
for
with you
whatever
more.
reason, it doesn't matter what their motivation was.
Yeah, they've been
But
yeah,
they've been on it
excellent.
for step one, and I cannot foresee them not continuing to do that. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Bill and then Finley.
And I would agree with that, because if you consider 2 winters ago, this community got slammed with a lot of snow, and there was a complete melt runoff, and we didn't have the type of water restrictions 2 years ago that we do right now, because we have drought-like conditions.
Sure.
So to me, the numbers right now, and I mean, and I say this with a lot of respect, the numbers right now, I'm not kind of sort of concerned of. I want to look at March. I want to look at April. I want to see if we get slammed with another big winter. I want to see what happens when our aquifers actually recharge and they recharge to full capacity, and then start monitoring those wells and see what is our baseline for our numbers, because it's at 10 right now, and I'm not a hydrologist or geologist, but I can only imagine that the recharge level is only so much. You're going to want these aquifers to be maxed out full bore, so that when DES comes in the process of doing their monitoring, now at least they've got a full aquifer. I was going to say playing with the full deck, but they got a full aquifer to work with by which they can do their testing. To me, the numbers I'm going to be looking at 2017. That's what I'm going to be concerned about.
Finley?
Thank you.
Yeah, I will in a minute.
No, you had.
Could you, I'm understanding and agreeing with Dan's thoughts on the testing. It just, you have to have controls. It seems pretty outrageous. However, if the motion you made, I would like to hear it, so that if we're just suggesting that that's a good idea to do.
Right, I'm not setting criteria. My motion is that the town council approve a letter to be sent to DES requesting that a random sample study of 50 MVD customers be tested for PFOA levels at no expense to the customers. That's all it was.
All right, because it's
what they do with the results, how they do it, what criteria used, that's up to DES.
all right.
That's the most important.
But
That's the
that's-
most important part
but
of the
that-
equation.
Then that's their decision on how to do it.
Right, and I agree with that, Dan.
They're the scientists.
Because
Sure.
I think, I just can't imagine how they're gonna come about with
That's
this
right.
thing.
That's
but-
right.
For argument's sake, I will support the motion. I don't see where the value will come from.
Right.
And they
But,
will make that determination. If they
Sure.
don't think there's value in doing it, then they can make that decision
that-
based upon their
Sure.
rationale.
And Bill apparently had heard from a gentleman named Jeff, I don't know his last
Jeff
name,
Hurd.
that he said they appeared, from what he said, to be
be
having
considering.
difficulty coming up with some way of doing it. Because
That's right.
controls and everything else, I don't
That's
know how you
right.
do it.
I
but-
agree. Bill?
And just to speak briefly to Finley, that's, like we were talking about, the age, residency.
All
I
those
mean,
things.
all that stuff has to be
They'll have to
factored
do
in.
their
That's
controls.
that's what they're getting paid to do, is to
That's
figure out
right.
what is the appropriate criteria to be able to administer a random sampling
That's right.
for
For it to
blood
mean
testing.
anything.
But just to speak to your motion, Nancy, and I do support, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I do support
You can
your,
call me Nancy.
I,
I know it's against your grain.
it's against the grain, sorry.
His name's
I-
Robert. They're his rules.
Go ahead.
I support your motion because I think we've heard tonight from the presentation, from the people here in the audience, the community is asking the town council to lead in one way, shape, or form. And I don't see the harm in asking, the Department of Health and Human Services to give the request of a random sampling blood testing the due weight that it deserves. And I think if it gives people that are participating, if it gives them some numbers to work with, if when the results are released, if it gives the community some level of peace of mind that the impact isn't as great as we once feared, then I think that's a win-win
Serve a
situation.
purpose.
It serves a purpose, so I support the motion.
Can someone call a question, please, or can I?
So I'll move the question, Madam Chair.
Is that what, oh, did you have a question, Tom? Go.
I wanted to ask a question.
Go right ahead.
You stated in your motion 50, and I'm not sure where that number comes from.
Out of
I'd rather
this-
make it a little bit lenient, 50 plus or minus, or approximately 50, or some kind of a suggestion that they should put the science into making the determination
How
of
about
what the
minimal
sample
of
size
50?
needed to be.
How about not, just let them decide? Because they're gonna know if it's gonna work or not, what they're gonna have to do to make it sorry about that, to
So-
make it,
So in the context of asking Health and Human Services the question during the governor's meeting, I said to them, I go, you're gonna have to do some type of, you're gonna have to draw from a pool of people, and then out of that pool of people, you're gonna have to identify what is an appropriate number to random sample.
This is
So-
not a valid number.
No, I agree with,
It will not
so
mean
I think
anything.
It's not statistical.
it's not,
It's
they're
not
gonna
s-
figure out something that
It's not
statistically
statistically
works.
significant. You're absolutely right. Don't use a number then. That's okay with me. I feel fine to modify that, omitting the number.
Just a comment, again, listening to the Peace testimony the other night, they were again, small community, they were working with numbers of 300. They did not think that was statistically valid
Significant
for,
either.
for the testing. They were looking for other ways to.
So there you go, so
Get-
they can make that
Yes,
determination.
and again, that might be a better body to give us some advice. I'm happy to
Right.
get those guys to advise us on what we should be talking about. I'm sure they're.
Okay, so my motion still stands, it was seconded by, so I'm gonna modify it to
That's
take out the
fine.
number.
Yep.
You agree with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Move the question.
Excellent. Okay. All those does anyone need me to reread the motion? No. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
My goodness. Any opposed? No. Did you say aye, Tom? Okay. 600. Let it be written, let it be done. Okay, so we're gonna write a letter representing the town council to TES.
And Eileen?
Do you have a question?
No comment.
Comment, go right ahead.
The discouraging thing for me from the beginning, from that informational meeting we had back in March or whatever, was that I believe that the ball was totally dropped by our New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. When I heard that evening that in 2005, they took a model from St. Cobain of what they were gonna be emitting into the air, and they did no follow-up testing
You're
at
right.
all, from what the gentleman said. That bothers me, because I do believe St. Cobain is a great corporate neighbor. I like them in my town. I'm disappointed with this, greatly disappointed, but they were doing what they were told they could do. I have to believe that the emissions were acceptable levels because DES should have been doing their job. And so, right now, they're in a predicament, we're in a predicament, and it's just an unfortunate thing all round. And that government body, that regulatory authority, who answers to nobody, unaccounted, unelectable individuals, failed at their job. And so I'd like them to know forward with this C6, they should be on top of it, because we use things in our lives as a civilized nation that sometimes turn out to be not so civilized, but we get benefit from these things, and at times it's not a good, the benefit wasn't worth the
Doesn't
risk.
outweigh the
But when they don't know and we're being dealt with this, we have to have those bodies that are supposed to be in charge of those things do their jobs. And so I'm disappointed for our town, I'm disappointed for St. Cobain, and I hope that this will be resolved in a good and proper way.
Dan?
I would just add to Finley's comments that St. Cobain is not the bad guy either. You know, you have to remember and make sure the public understands that they at no time did anything illegal or use materials that were illegal or banned. This was a good corporate neighbor who's been following the rules all along. So I hate it when people are looking for that boogeyman, you know, to someone to blame for their ills when St. Cobain was playing by the rules. Unintended consequences, yes, and we'll be living it for a decade to come, water filtration systems, et cetera. But I want to make sure that people understand that. I don't want them to have an unjustified bad impression of what St. Cobain has done. They were doing the manufacturing work with known chemicals. You make the great point how they banned one chemical and then so the government approved this next one.
Sure.
Again, falling under the heading of emerging
contaminants.
emerging contaminants. So, just wanted to add.
Yeah,
Add that to the mix.
And I acknowledge that, nothing illegal. I think history will tell us, based on DuPont, who's probably the leader here, the knowledge that they had going back decades on the potential here.
How much they did
That
know.
is not currently part of what we can even see.
Yep.
So,
I thank you for your efforts, sir. I really do.
yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Did
just
you-
briefly,
Informative, appreciate
I
it.
would like to add that I 100% agree with you. We don't know what the future holds. If we look into the past at asbestos, at MBTE, at toluene, at
Yeah.
benzene, at sodium in our water supply and things of that nature, there have been all kinds of things that have shown up as problems. We've dealt with them when we've understood them.
Yep.
And we'll deal with this as we understand it. But I urge you also to try to tone down a little bit of your inflammatory statements. And by that I mean statements like, you know, Merrimack's water is loaded with PFCs. Well, there are higher PFCs in Merrimack's water than there is in Nashua's. But loaded versus Hoosick Falls or versus the neighbor next to St. Cobain that had 2,500 parts per trillion. I don't think Merrimack's water comes anywhere near loaded in that regard. And so I just urge you to be a little cautious, because newspapers are going to pick up on statements like that, and that's what's going to get into the press. That's what's going to kill our real estate values. Those are the kinds of things that are going to cause us real problems. And so we need to be aware of our issues. We need to address them and attack them head on. And we have been doing that. This council has been doing that. We've gone through a lot more information than you presented. You presented a very sketchy detail of what's been going on. If you've been following our meetings since last March, we've been talking about a lot of different things all along. And so I just make that urge that there are things that we've dealt with in the past. There will be things we deal with in the future that we don't know anything about. And so we always have to be vigilant. And I'm not trying to focus on you specifically, but to all of the people.
I'm thick-skinned. You
Merrimack.
could throw it at me. I have no issue with that. But I think the worst thing that we could do is nothing, right? Action, some action. I appreciate the motion. I think that's a great first step. It will help us to identify the extent of and that's where we'll find. If it's in the blood systems, then we have an issue, right? If we find it's not, hey, we're okay. So, yeah, I appreciate the comments for sure.
Bill?
And just to dovetail off of Councilor Koenig's comments, I, read everything on social media, and I certainly would encourage people to be very cautious about wanting to boycott local businesses if they use MVD water. I just think that
I wouldn't advocate for that.
I understand that, but when something like that is out on the internet and it's public, it generates a negative impression. And I think all of us here, whether it be the mom and pop sub shop to some of our bigger corporate partners that are in our community, we need to be mindful that they provide, strong economic development to make Merrimack what it is today. So I just would ask you to be cautious.
Yeah, I can't be responsible for social media for
You know what?
sure.
I agree.
For
And
sure.
I don't even read
And I
it
would not
anymore.
advocate that. But it is something that is a good point. I try to make that point.
Okay.
Businesses should be aware of it, and it could
And they
impact
are.
them, for sure.
Businesses are very aware about what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And you've given us things to think about, and now you have more information as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next thing on the agenda, LED streetlight discussion by Paul McCallie. This is to update the town council on the status of the LED streetlight transition, and this was tabled from the August 18th meeting. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. I'll make this, give you a quick update and a real quick overview.
Yeah.
A little dates and timelines for everybody. I've been researching the town's high-pressure sodium streetlights with a more efficient LED streetlight since December of 2015. At the June 10, 2016 council retreat, the council authorized the finance department and myself to begin talks with Eversource to look at replacing the high-sodium lights, streetlights. On Friday, July 29th of this year, we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting for our vendors for the LED streetlight project. Bids were opened on August 15th. We received 8 bids from 6 different bidders. They ranged from $151,000 to $260,000.
That was close.
It was out of those
Good
8
thing
bids.
you weren't looking for solar panels.
7 bids were within $30,000 of one another. One bid was the $260,000. So
Yeah, I didn't
they
want
were.
to work.
It
He
isn't like
obviously
we had a
didn't
real
want the
low
job.
guy and a real high guy. They were pretty much stacked together. A little background. Currently, we have an estimated 633 high-pressure sodium streetlights throughout the town. Our yearly cost to operate those streetlights is about $100,000. In doing my research, I found that Eversource will offer a rebate when you switch from high-sodium streetlights to LED, $100 per fixture. However, a town of our size is capped at $50,000 a year. So as we're going through this, talking to Eversource, and our vendors as we're going through, Eversource came up with a solution to do about 140 lights this year. Their fiscal year ends November 1st. And then Starting in January, do the remaining 500 lights. This way, we optimize about $64,000 in rebates back from Eversource. We thought that was a great idea. The streetlights, the LED streetlights have about a 20-year useful life. There's a couple things you need to know about LED streetlights. If a high sodium pressure streetlight goes out or there's a problem with it, Eversource comes and replaces the streetlight at no cost to the town. It's part of our fee of $100,000. If an LED streetlight goes out, what will happen is the town will be on the hook to buy either the light panel or a new Cobra head, give that to Eversource, then Eversource will replace the Cobra head. And when I talk about a Cobra head, it's just the part, all that's being replaced on these is just the part that comes out that houses the sodium light bulb, basically. And it's, what I was told, it's 3 wire nuts. It's a real quick solution. Depending on how many guys they get in, they can do probably around 2 to 4 an hour, depending on how far apart they are and how cold or how warm it is during the day.
So we pay for the lights, but not for this actual installing of it?
Yeah, we wouldn't have to pay for that. That would be included in the price.
You said several times now it costs us about $100,000 a year to run the high-pressure sodium lights.
Right.
Do we have an estimate of the cost to run the LED lights?
Yeah, we're figuring between $77,000 and $83,000. So it's about a $17,000 to $23,000 savings on just running these
Per year.
Per year. Because you're taking a
Electrical
400-watt bulb and replacing it with maybe a 75-watt bulb, and there's a conversion scale. It gets real complicated. It's not, okay, this is this. There's a conversion scale that Eversource uses, and we actually did that when we were reviewing the bids to see where we'd be, and we figured we'd be between $17,000 and $23,000 savings.
So 400 to 100, or 400 sounds like a much higher percentage than 100 down to 75 or 80. But so where's the extra cost coming in? Are they charging more to run the LED lights than they would for the sodium lights, or?
No, it's based on the formula that Eversource uses. It's based on a wattage and a looms.
Lumens, yeah.
And that's the other thing.
But they charge for wattage. They don't charge for lumens.
No, they charge for wattage, but they'll charge you at the high end. A lot of these manufacturers will do a 15, 20, 30 watt fixture. Eversource charges you at the 30-watt fixtures. So we have to look at some of that information when we do it. And so if we're replacing a 50-watt fixture with one of those fixtures of 10, say 15, 25, and 30, it's a 50 versus a 20.
Okay, I thought you said 400 a minute ago.
Well, 400 are some of the big, powerful ones in town on the main strips, and we replace those down. There's a variety of different wattages all throughout. It's not all 640 are not all 400-watt bulbs. There's a variety of different wattages throughout town.
Okay.
And in neighborhoods and things of that sort. One of the things that happens with this is that two things are coming out of this. We're going to actually have a street light layer for our GIS by our consultant, by this company, Affinity, chose CDM to help them. Right now they're going out and mapping every street light in town with GPS coordinates, pole number. So that if a light does, we'll have a GIS layer given to us as part of this contract, so that if a light goes out, we can go in there, punch it in. If a phone call comes in the highway saying the light at Babuzik and McGowan is out, they can punch in the pole, give Eversource a call, say, pole number 5292, the street light's out. It helps Eversource get to the pole instead of them searching
I
for which
recently
pole.
had to do that. My
Right.
street light went out. There's a little tag on it.
Yep, you have to find the pole. So, and like I said, the Eversource rebate's between $64,000 and $60,000. We already, since when we opened up the bids, we took our 3 low bidders, actually our 4 low bidders, sent them over to Eversource, because since they're giving us the rebate, they have to approve the fixture and the company and everything. They already approved it. So we're moving forward. Kyle had the first meeting for the construction project phase, met with CDM, met with our vendor Affinity LED Lights out of Portsmouth. They did the streetlight project up in Claremont. Claremont didn't have enough good things to say about this company. Just in the meetings that we've had with our sales rep, he's been, yeah, maybe you want to look at this, we're going to give you this, we're going to look at that. Why don't you look at your parking lights? and we'll work with Eversource to see if there's a rebate for parking lot lights. So they're looking at those kind of deals, and those things also. So that's where we stand right now. So if you see somebody running around taking GPS coordinates of the lights and the telephone poles, it's
You'll know
CDM.
what.
We're doing this project. Sorry that we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on this. However, it was a lot of research on our end, and the technology has, in the last year roughly, has changed so much and so drastically. You know, we had the American Association saying 4,000 and 5,000 lumens is bad for you, so we changed to 3,000 lumens, and we had the price of the technology has come down drastically since I started this project until we actually awarded it. So
When you say bad in what way? When they say 4,000 lumens was bad, bad what?
it screws up some people in cities. They're finding that people who are in these kind of 4,000, 5,000 lumens, it's screwing up
The
their
lumen or
Are you talking
Kelvin?
lumens or
Kelvin.
candles? Temperature?
Kelvins.
Kelvin, I
Kelvins,
think.
Kelvins.
So
Sorry.
it's the temperature of the light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
The
It's temperature.
5,000 is bright blue. I
Right,
hate
and
it.
Yeah.
it's screwing up people's sleep patterns. They found that it's screwing up people's sleep patterns.
Oh, okay.
So, sorry.
Yeah, it
I'm
can-
not an engineer when it comes to this. So I'm trying.
The electronics inside the units can also screw up my radios.
There you go.
So don't put one in front of
We'll
it
make
now.
sure we'll have 10 in front
I
of his house.
haven't had any trouble with the ones, I've been swapping them out in my house,
Right.
and I haven't had any trouble with it, but when they first came on the market, there was all kinds of, you know,
Yeah, yeah, right. And then that's a lot of what's going on
a
and
lot of RF.
Are we 3,000 is good, 3,000, 3,400. That's what I like, so, at least for my street. That's
Which is
the,
not- This is a little bit brighter here.
this is, yeah, this seems a little brighter. I have the LEDs on my front porch. I have 4
Well,
of them.
they
and
want to
it's-
see
it's
us. They don't
spectacular.
want to see us at home.
Right.
Here they
But the lighting, it's more pleasant, it's more daytime lighting, I guess. The other is a brighter, you know, the hotter you,
Yeah, it's more
the higher temperature you
industrial
go.
lighting.
Yeah, so, but I was wondering, we're still paying, back to your savings versus the wattages of these. It's still, they figure by the wattage we use and then a demand charge or whatever else goes with that, but they're,
Yeah.
so, okay, because I'm curious on the number difference, but
it's
I'm good
based
with
on the
wattage.
wattage. I actually have it here if you want to really get
Yeah, I
into
don't
it.
know.
I'll show it to you.
If you could
It's
share
based-
that later on.
Yeah,
that'd
I'll
be
share
great.
that later on. It's based on the wattage of the fixture that we're replacing versus what we're replacing it with.
So there's a
And then there's a
correlation.
demand charge, and then there's a conversion charge of an LED. Though-
If I ask a question to be clear, we would own these fixtures.
These are our
'Cause
fixtures.
As of
We
right
don't-
now, we don't.
As of right now, we do
All
not.
the lighting in town is owned by Eversource.
All the lighting in
That's-
town is
That's the big
owned by
change at
Eversource.
that point,
Right.
too.
And another thing to remember, we're only replacing the ones that we pay for. The town has 2 sections of the DPW highway, Common Man to Nashua, and from Walgreens to Bedford, that is owned by and paid for by the state of New Hampshire. So those are, and Continental Boulevard
Right.
will not be, these lights will not be replaced. The state has not started this process of changing over their street lights yet.
So they will remain as they are.
They will
not
remain
be
as high
LED.
pressure sodium, not LED, but every streetlight the town
Gotcha.
owns will be looked at and replaced in
Gotcha.
this. And we're doing a full inventory as we speak.
Finley and them
How many
town?
private, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
How many private lights do we have?
There are some neighborhoods that were built that have
633.
some lights in it, so that have some that the town has taken over. For instance, Mallard Point, that
Yeah.
there's 6 or 7 lights in there. When the town
My
accepted
neighborhood has
your
lights.
neighborhood, when the town accepted the street plans
Right.
in the street, they accepted the lights, and those are,
Yeah, but
they're not private as in private, they're
There are
town
some
owned.
private lights out
Yeah,
there. There are people that have lights on their own poles.
right, and those, if it's a private person, if for instance, if I owned a pole in front of my house and had a light on it, that would not be replaced underneath the town, they would have to do that on there.
Finley?
How the high-pressure sodium, what's the longevity of those? We're expecting 20 years on the LED, do you recall?
No, I don't have that answer, but I can get that answer. And the other thing with the high pressure sodium, it's an orbit. So you have reflectors in the light, and they try to put reflectors and mirrors to push the light down. With the LED,
No, these are
Just
LED.
my figure.
yeah, with the LED lights, they're more directional, and you can actually get them down on the road where they belong.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah,
of,
if you look at the the new road in Nashua,
Right.
the parkway that they put
The
in.
parkway that they
those
put
are
in has all
LED lit.
LEDs. If you, actually, if you go up to the outlet mall now,
Take a look at it.
the outlet mall has LEDs. They actually went with another generation that we're not going with. They actually have LEDs on dimmers, so they can dim down the lights.
At
And then if
night,
there's a problem,
after.
they can turn them up and the lights will come up. And bigger cities like Chicago and New York are going to that technology. The costs
Yeah.
definitely outweighed the benefit for the town of Merrimack to do something like that. It was, adding another $200 to $300 a light fixture, and we really didn't see how we would utilize that in the town of Merrimack,
Where do they put the dimmer switch?
Well,
Exactly.
You need to turn them up.
Well, it's
I
all
don't think
controlled,
so.
believe it or not, it's all controlled at your dispatch location.
Oh, interesting.
So dispatch, in the bigger cities, what we were told is that dispatch would get a phone call, there's a shooting at XYZ Street, boom, all the lights in a mile
Interesting.
radius would come
That is
full bore
Right, yeah.
and bright.
That'd be pretty
Because if they had to chase people. And it was funny, not funny, but when they were trying to talk about this, and one of the salesmen, when I talked to him about it, he goes, it's a great feature, it just, the technology needs to come, the price needs to come back down to the technology
Yeah.
right now. And like I said, the cost did not,
Sure.
the
No,
benefit,
Not for Merrimack.
not for
We don't have
Merrimack.
enough
No.
density of lighting to really have
Right.
that value.
Exactly.
Not enough crime yet.
Well, we might
Quiet.
have enough crime, but we don't, if you look on Natticook Road where there's a light at every road intersection, turn those up bright, you don't really change
You don't
much.
have to change,
I mean, because between the blocks, you wouldn't
Yeah,
have any.
you're just
I've always
lighting up the
I've always
trees.
questioned the need to have a street light on a cul-de-sac.
Well, I understand that too,
Because the argument initially was, we need them so that we can, it's a safety issue
yeah.
in terms of approaching an intersection. A cul-de-sac, the traffic on a cul-de-sac is next to nothing after dark. Coming out of because there's no, I can see a connecting street, yeah,
Yeah,
but a cul-de-sac, explain this to me.
And I believe with the new subdivision rules and regulations, it's only on the main intersections that the streetlights are going. They're not doing any more streetlights within the subdivisions.
Well, thank you very.
I just want to
go
know,
ahead.
what, the bid that Eversource accepted, which was how much?
It was $160,000. We also put in a $15,000 contingency, and we also put in $15,000 to review all the parking lot lights. So total bid came out to $190,000.
and you're looking at about a $64,000 rebate.
$64,000 rebate on that, so we're looking at,
Thirty.
and that doesn't include the $15,000 for parking lots. We're looking at that also, because most of our parking lot lights here are what we call metered lights. So they run on our meter in Town Hall. So we have to talk to, and actually our contractor's talking to Eversource about what happens if we do that. Well, is there a rebate for doing something like that? And if there's not a rebate, how much is it actually gonna make our electricity kilowatts go down? Because we would have those throughout. And there's some, like at Wasserman Park and MYA and Town Hall and the Highway Garage. We do, and the fire stations, they're what we call metered parking lot lights. They're not just a telephone pole in the middle of the parking lot. That's not.
I think it's a great idea.
I do
Glad
too.
you're
Awesome.
pursuing it.
Thank you for the update, Paul. Appreciate it.
And when we get more information, like I said, the one last thing is that it's such a short time frame for them to get these installed, 140 installed. They have to have them done by, I believe, November 1st. So once we get the design, once we get the audit goes to Eversource once again. They review it, they bless the audit, then they can start construction. They already ordered the fixtures. The other thing is that every Cobra head is going to be recycled. And that's part of Affinity's job, is they have to recycle every Cobra head. They can't just throw them in a landfill. They have to recycle the lights,
Okay.
they have to recycle the metals, and that's all part of this whole process that we have going on.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Thank you,
Thank
Paul,
you.
nice job.
Well, thank you, thank you. Kyle, like I said.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. Now we have minutes to approve. July 21st meeting, the review had been tabled from the August 18th Town Council meeting.
Madam Chair, I move the town council meeting minutes of Thursday, July 21st, 2016, with the following modification.
Go right ahead.
Page 2, line 18, Wells 4 and 5 with the number sign next to 4, not next to the S.
Okay, gotcha.
Page 2, line 43, I believe Clark spells his name without an E. And does he, is the last name, is it E and I or I before E?
Except after C.
Except after C, I knew you were going to say that.
We are wise guys, aren't we?
And by the way, Paul, the last name is consistent throughout, so,
I have, let me tell you right here, I have a letter that has his
there you
name
go.
on it.
From him.
He was CC'd. There is no E in Clark, and it's Friese. Good catch.
2 for 2. Thank you. Page 3, line 26, and I'll ask my fellow Jesuit educated,
I was not Jesuit educated.
well, LaSalle
You're
wasn't
talking to
Jesuit?
me.
No, it was Christian Brothers.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anyway, line 26 on page 3, ran into one of Senator Ayotte's aides, AIDS, is it not AIDS?
Yes, yeah. There you go.
Go ahead.
I'm done, that was it, that's all I had.
Okay. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Motion made by Bill Boyd, seconded by Tom Mahan. Any other changes? All those in favor say aye.
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 I abstain.
Okay,
I
so
abstain.
you abstained as well. Okay, so we have 5.
No.
Nope, try 4, 0, 2. And Tom Koenig and Tom Mahan are
Oh, okay.
abstaining.
I thought LaSalle was
Okay,
Jesuit.
August 18th.
Madam Chair, I move the town council meeting minutes of Thursday, August 18th, 2016, as presented.
Ah. Motion made by Bill Boyd, seconded by Tom Mahan. Any other changes? There are no changes, but any changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so that's 6. I can't do 2 things at once, apparently. 600. Why am I handed this? All right, I'll ask this when we're done. Okay.
Because it's yours.
Oh, it was in the stuff that I gave you? Okay. Comments from the press. Comments from the public. Comments from the council. None? Wow, Tom.
We had a planning board meeting Tuesday night, relatively minor issues. The old DR Power building across from the Flat Lake Company north of town is going to be occupied by a automotive sales and service. And there was one other one that didn't seem overly exciting, but you all got the minutes of the meeting anyway, so. But just to let you know that we did have a planning board meeting Tuesday, we'll have one again Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, right before our council meeting. It's just one of those things where the odd even cycles of the week all end up on the same week. But anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, motion for
Motion to adjourn.
adjournment. Motion made by Bill Boyd, seconded by
Second.
Tom Koenig. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any nays? And seeing none, 600. Thank you, good night.
PFOAs, we needed to enhance our thinking because we could be thinking about lead or whatever. So the timing of this was very, very interesting to me. This material has been distributed to all 6 principals. We have made contact with South Christian Academy so that they have the material, and also to the MVD because I wasn't assured that Ron Miner had received the information from Robert Mann, who is the head of Drinking Water and Groundwater Bureau at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. So just as I went to share this material with Matt, he also had begun a process that I want you to know about. We were operating concurrently, if you will.
Yes. Well, the superintendent got this letter from Department of Environmental Services. I kind of concurrently, around the same time, got a communication from the Department of School Approval Building Aid, Marjorie Schoonemaker, who's up there at the state, stating that this is something we should be looking at as far as lead goes. And lead occurs in school buildings primarily because of the solder joints used in the copper piping. So this copper piping running throughout all our homes, all our schools, and there are lead solder joints connecting that copper piping. So in order to go ahead, it was highly suggested that we look into doing testing. I know what highly suggested means. It means, why don't you go and take care of this as soon as you can so there won't be an issue down the road. So I went ahead and we're going to be doing testing at every bubbler, every faucet in the district, in each school. RPF, again, we're associating ourselves with them. They've been given maps of all the buildings, and Tom Tussaud, who's on vacation this week, looks like he has good weather. But when he gets back, we're going to go around to all the buildings, but we have to start first thing in the morning because when they test for lead, they want to get the first draw. They don't want the faucets running for half the day. So Tom will be, I will not be with Tom. Tom will be in the building with Roger at around 5 o'clock in the morning, going from this building to that building to try and get everything done before the high school opens up. But he'll probably start at the high school because they usually have people in there at around 6:30 or so. Some of the teachers come in very early. So that'll be the rotation. So we get the first draw from every fountain, and then at the kitchen faucets, everything like that. And then we all send everything out to a lab, and it's probably going to take, with the backup, with the PFOA testing and everything like that, probably going to take 3 to 4 weeks before we have anything. But it's an important thing to do. We hadn't checked it in a while. Years ago, I recall when Bob Kelly, you all remember Bob Kelly from the Budget Committee, delightful man, very intelligent man, PhD, as a matter of fact. When he was on the water commissioner, he used to do the lead testing for us himself for the high school in particular, and used to visit my office. So it's been a while since we've done it, and with the letter from the DES and then the communication from the Department of Ed, I figured it was time to do it again. So we will be having those results when they come in 3 to 4 weeks from now.
When the testing was done before, I know you said it's been a while, do you recall that there's ever been an issue with lead?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
Like I say, Mr. Kelly just tested the high school, and there was never an issue with lead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael?
Just on the point of that was brought up when we were talking about the PFOAs, about possibly testing for additional items, is that something that could be reviewed in the same test at the time to see if there's anything?
Yeah.
So again, perfect.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Davis?
So you mentioned that you received communication from the Building Aid Department. I didn't even know they still existed, to be honest with you.
They do.
Surprise, surprise.
They do, right.
And I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it anyway. Are they, since they're highly suggesting, are they offering any financial assistance in either doing the testing or mitigating any results that we may find?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was my question. Never mind. And so, are there any other questions on lead in water? Okay. Do you have a question about water as far as it relates to testing? Yeah, because when in Rome, I guess we should probably ask your question.
Yeah, I just, in regards to just the follow-up with all the other stuff that is going on with the PFOA stuff, have we made any progress with the filters? Or
What we're going to be doing, it's not as easy as telling them that you have 47 parts per trillion at Reeds Ferry School, give me a filter.
Yeah.
I talked with the MVD. We average around 3.9 gallons a minute per school day. That's a piece of information that the company who's going to provide us the quote needs. But they also need the peak flow. And that can be done if you do a study of your building over time to figure out what your peak flow is. However, the company that we contacted is coming into the building, into Reeds Ferry, next Friday to take a look at where the piping comes in, the size, and how many fixtures we have, etc. And they think they'll be able to ascertain what our peak flow would be at any given time in order to give us some sort of a quote that would address PFOAs only as far as filtration of that school. So we've started that process of looking for a number. Thought it was going to be a lot easier than it was, and it turned out it wasn't. So we'll have that, and we'll start to see what that would cost. The filtration system we'd be looking at would be to bring it down to as close to zero as possible from the 47 that it is right now. So
And
I know you guys, I wasn't here during that meeting, and Tom was here, and Tom said the board did ask for a price for a filtration system.
Yeah, and the reason that I bring it up is I just want the public to know that the administration is actually still continuing to address that and not update, so I appreciate it.
And we
Thank you.
just didn't put it on the agenda because we just didn't have the information yet.
I just think, based off of everybody else, just a quick update that, hey, we are going forward, that's it. It's definitely helpful.
Yep.
And you wouldn't anticipate a problem getting that figure to us before budget season, so as we kind of weigh all things?
No, I wouldn't anticipate any problem with that as far as the timing of that goes.
Davis?
So when Michael mentioned water, it reminded me that while the building at Reeds is on town water, there is a well there for irrigation. Has that been looked at, or is there a need? There is a pump house down on the fields. On the
That would
soccer
be for
fields.
the town fields, right?
Okay, so that there are those fields school fields or town fields?
Well, the land belongs to us, but the fields are used by the MYA.
So who owns the water? That's probably something we need to look into.
Hadn't thought about that.
I know, and I didn't either until Michael just said Reeds and water, and all of a sudden it hit me.
Let me make myself a note. I know it's just for irrigation.
Right. But if
if
it's tainted water that's going onto fields that people use, that could be a concern.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry to bring it up at the 11th hour.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
It's only 9:20. It's okay. Are there any other questions on water in general? Then we will go on to item number 7, which is air. We've gone from dirt to water to air. So air quality testing at Thornton's Ferry and Matt Chevenel.
Again, this is a very comprehensive document here. We went and took a look at air quality at Thornton's Ferry Elementary School. There was some concerns from the staff as far as the air quality and it causing breathing difficulties, etc. So we went ahead and we did kind of a targeted first test. And some of the highlights, and I won't go through the entire form, is, in that school, there's a situation with some mice that we have to go and do some targeted trapping of those. That was noticed. There is a discoloration of the ceiling grid. If you look up here, you'll see a metal ceiling grid in the art room. That was primarily done via the old kiln that was there. The new kiln that we have at Thornton's Ferry is directly vented through the ceiling to the outdoors. It has a set of louvers that automatically open up when the kiln is on, and it vents out, so it doesn't have the leakage that the older one did for years, causing that kind of rust on the grid. The carbon dioxide, the CO2 levels, have found to be very adequate in the building.